Good morning. I'm Ruth Van Lillian, the minister of this congregation. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Tuscaloosa, a covenantal community founded on love and a common devotion to our free faith. We recognize all the earth as sacred ground, and we welcome each other into this virtual space. We especially welcome those visiting with us. We're so glad that you are here this morning. We invite you to connect with us through the comments or via our website or Facebook page. We join with all member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association in affirming and promoting our 7 principles, including the inherent dignity and worth of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, and the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. We bear witness to the pain and suffering of persons of color in our communities and across our country, and we continue in our commitment to fight injustice and to search for ways to build a better world. Black Lives Matter.
Good morning. I'm Jennifer Horn, the lay service leader for today. There's a link in our order of service in the video description below, along with other useful information. If you're viewing from a smart TV, you may not see the links and comments below. In that case, you can access the links and comments by going to our UU Congregation of Tuscaloosa YouTube channel through the YouTube app on your smartphone, tablet, or personal computer. There are a number of important announcements in the order of service, which you can see linked. Our church website and Facebook page have information about all our online activities. Also, members and friends should read all Newsnet emails and our monthly newsletter to stay updated on congregational matters. We also invite you to our online Zoom coffee hour immediately following this service so that we may join together in real time for community and fellowship. See the link in the links and comments below or in the Newsnet email. We hope to see you there. The prelude prepares us for the service. We invite you to light a chalice of your own at home. This might be a simple candle in a bowl or something more elaborate that you've made or purchased. We light this chalice as a beacon of our faith and as a reminder of our commitment to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We worship together, though we are at a distance, by celebrating that which is sacred to us, individually and collectively.
Our opening words are call and response. I invite you to respond at home. We are seekers of truth. We welcome you to come in out of the storms of your lives. We are seekers of truth. We invite you to set aside disillusionment and disappointment. We are seekers of truth. Let go of what is artificial and false. We are seekers of truth. Leave behind the seductions and deceptions. We are seekers of truth. Here, your minds and your hearts can be opened. We are seekers of truth. We search together responsibly for truth and meaning. We are seekers of truth. In the clear light of truth, we will find freedom. We are seekers of truth.
When all the peoples on this earth know deep inside their precious worth, when every single soul is free, we'll earn the name humanity. The choice to be the best we can begins the day we say I am. The unity for which we sigh will never come through hate or lie. The lights and tallest now proclaim that when we share our inner flame and nurture root and branch with pride, we'll harvest peace both far and wide.
When we gather in loving community, we remember that we do not travel this earth alone. We share our lives as we light candles and hold each other in meditative thought and reverence. I will light a candle in my home as you light a candle in yours, and we will observe a moment of silence while you share your joys and burdens in the comments below and engage with each other in celebration and condolences. I will now light a final candle for all those burdens and celebrations shared in our virtual spaces and for those that went unspoken. May the warm light of these flames bring us peace.
Let us spend some time in silent meditation, and then I will close us with some words from Nelson Mandela. We understand it still, that there is no easy road to freedom. We know it well that none of us acting alone can achieve success. We must therefore act together as a united people for national reconciliation, for nation building, for the birth of a new world. Let there be justice for all. Let there be peace for all. Let there be work, bread, water, and salt for all. Let each know that for each the body, the mind, and the soul have been freed to fulfill themselves. Let freedom reign. Amen. Shalom. Blessed be.
Hello. Today's story for all ages is The Bungled Jungle. The lion in the jungle was a good and mighty king. He wore a crown upon his head. He wore a golden ring. He loved and cared for all the beasts who shared his jungle home. They all would bow before him wherever he would roam. But the king was growing old. He removed his ring and crown. "I'm too tired to rule," he said. "It's time that I step down." The animals grew worried. They asked, "What shall we do? We need to choose a leader, that's clearly true, but who?" "Pick one of us to be the king," cried all the chimpanzees, "so we're sure to have protection for our homes up in the trees." "That settles it," the chimps declared. "This meeting is adjourned." "But wait," cried all the hippos, "we're still a bit concerned. We love to wallow in the mud. We feel there is a need to keep the river flowing." The elephants agreed. Then swooping down into their midst, there came a mighty bird. He fanned his tail and strutted and demanded to be heard. Trees and rivers are important, but does anybody care about the cranes who spend their days flying through the air? Then slithered in a python, and he mentioned with a hiss, "King or no king, this I know, we can't go on like this. Trees and rivers, air above, all places beasts are found, but I travel on my belly, so save my home, the ground." Gorillas, zebras, and giraffes were voicing their concerns, and mighty wildebeest begging, "Come now, wait your turns." They were speaking all at once, and no one could be heard. It was a bungled jungle, and it sounded quite absurd. High above the hurly-burly came a buzzing overhead. It was a lowly poop fly. "Yes, poop, that's what I said." First he circled for a landing, then he settled on a stump. He bumbled and he stumbled, then he landed on his rump. Taking care of where we live is a proper thing to do, and I would like to share with you a different point of view. Some want what is best for the trees, some love the water more, some believe we need clean air, some love the jungle floor. The jungle is our home, but we aren't being smart if we only show concern for just a single part. Take a poop fly, for example. I work among the trees to pollinate their blooms with my friends, the helpful bees. I also need the river. Like you, it's where I drink. To keep our water fresh and clean matters, don't you think? I'm known to spend a lot of time flying high up in the air, so like the birds, I'm interested in how it looks up there. But my favorite spot of all is right here on the ground, for that is where the poop is, where I like to hang around. When the poop fly mentioned poop, the jungle beast said, "Ew!" But they began to stop and think, what the poop fly says is true. The chimps all scratched their heads. Then one dared to declare, although we live in treetop homes, we also need the air. For when we swing from limb to limb, the air is where we're at. I guess you'd say the air is our part-time habitat. Then the creatures in the river said, it cannot be denied. We all need the trees as well for shade that they provide. Then the warthog spoke his mind. I live down on the ground, but when I need a bath, he said, the river's where I'm found. We need the ground and river and the trees with sky above, for these are all the parts of the jungle home we love. A voice cried out, let's hold a vote, so all can have a say in what is best for all of us, the democratic way. They thanked their friend the poop fly, for he'd shown them all the key to peaceful, happy living, which is how our lives should be. They also thanked the poop fly, who made them all aware that voting is a way to keep things fair and square. We like to vote, they all declared, for no one gets left out. Democracy's the way to go, we know without a doubt. Let's vote for our new president, the jungle beast sang out. Can you guess who they elected? Poop fly, without a doubt. Thank you for listening to today's story for all ages. Goodbye.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Out of gratitude for all we have been given and all we have now, we share our resources because we love and trust each other, and because this church enriches our lives and empowers us to make our world better. We rely upon each other, members and friends, and we appreciate the payment of pledges and the generous donations to support the legacy, vision, and work of this church community. Contributions may be made by PayPal using the link below in the description, or by mailing checks to UUCT. All undesignated contributions will be divided between our Split the Plate recipient organization and our congregation. Our Split the Plate partner for this month will be shown on the screen as you're listening to this. Please mark your pledge payment to UUCT in the comments field on PayPal or in the memo line of your check. If you prefer to write a check to the selected organization, please mail it directly to the address we include in the description of this video. The offertory music will continue in this window as you open a new window to make your contributions. By the work of our hands and the generosity of our hearts, our love is made real. Thank you for these gifts.
Hi, I'm Steve Borelli, and I'm going to talk today about the fifth UU principle in our continuing series of sermons about the UU principle. And that is, quote, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. So we affirm the importance of democracy both in our congregations and in the larger world. I assume this also means the UUA denomination as well, although they don't mention that. Okay, so you've probably heard the famous quote from Winston Churchill that democracy is the worst form of government except for every other form that's ever been invented. Definitely a backhanded compliment to democracy, but a meaningful one. Yeah, I had a colleague many years ago when I first came to the university named Stephen Reed. He taught Japanese politics, and he's actually now in Japan, if he's not retired, teaching Japanese politics. His quote was, democracy is everyone's second favorite form of government. And what he meant by that was, everybody's first favorite form of government was an authoritarian dictatorship in which they or somebody like them, somebody who thought like they do, is in charge. Somebody with the same beliefs and values as I do is in charge. And if you can't have that, then you'll settle for democracy as your second choice, a distant second choice. And what he meant by that was, well, if you can't have your way all the time, if you can't have your values imposed on the whole society, then you'll settle for having your values or values like yours imposed on the society some of the time, okay? Or all of your values some of the time, or some of your values all the time. You'll take half a loaf, basically, at least some chance of getting what you want some of the time. Okay. So think for a minute about what happens when we don't get what we want or what we value out of democracy, when democracy doesn't lead to the results that we would like for it to. Usually when elections don't turn out the way they do, or policy decisions don't turn out the way we want them to, we say, well, there was something wrong with the process. And there's a number of different things that we think were probably wrong with the process. One reason historically, which has been very true and still continues to be true in some places, is that the reason democracy doesn't give us better policies or better politicians is because large numbers of people are being excluded, either legally excluded or disenfranchised or discouraged, made to feel that their participation is worthless or hopeless. Okay. Obviously living in Alabama, 70 years ago, there were counties in Alabama where the vast majority of people who lived in the county, of adults who lived in the county, were excluded from voting through a combination of intimidation, coercion, lawless behavior by government officials, etc. Okay. And today we fight against new rules for voting or new rules regarding voting that we think would disenfranchise people, either intentionally or unintentionally. And obviously that's very worthwhile. Maximizing the number of people who participate is very important, and getting rid of barriers that exclude people or prevent people from participating is extremely important. One thing I would just say, though, is that we don't always know exactly how people are going to vote or what kinds of opinions they are going to express. If they've been excluded from the process for years and all of a sudden they're being included. It may be the values that we hold dear. It may not be. It may be a completely different set of values. We never know for sure. Okay, so that's one thing we say when democracy doesn't give us the results we want. Second thing we say is that the system has been corrupted. Usually money is the villain here. You may know that our church was the birthplace of the Tuscaloosa chapter of Move to Amend, which is designed to amend the Constitution in order to try to get big money out of politics. Sometimes we think it's some kind of favoritism or cronyism that's corrupted the system. Officially we're all equal, our votes are all equal, but we all know that because of money or because of people's connections, not everybody has equal access to the system. Absolutely, I agree with this. I do think that the money, if somehow we could amend the Constitution so the money didn't equal speech, we would get, the outcomes that we would want out of a democracy. But again, I would kind of issue a caution that there have been reforms throughout history that were totally well-intentioned, designed to empower people, that actually didn't have that effect at all. Things like term limits, putting things on the ballot for people to vote on, even something as simple and seemingly harmless as opening up meetings to the public. Okay, transparency. Those were all very well intentioned, but some people argued that all three of those had the interest of actually increasing the access and role of special interests in politics rather than decreasing. Okay, I'm not saying that those were wrong or that we shouldn't try to reform things, but it is true that reforms always have, or sometimes have, unintended consequences. So a third thing we say when democracy doesn't work the way we want it to is that, well, that's because a lot of the people who participated didn't know what they were doing. They were misinformed, they were uninformed, they were misled, they just plain believed things that weren't true, or they didn't know what was best for them. They didn't know what was really in their best interest. Obviously, nowadays, the people to blame for this, we say, are, well, it's media, social media, or the media, with the explosion of all these different forms of media out there, there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation going on, a lot of opportunities for people to delude themselves with things that are wildly untrue. And there's no doubt that technology has made the problem 10 times worse. But I'm old enough to remember that even before the internet, people would say things like, well, if people really knew what was best for them, they wouldn't vote the way they did. For example, why do people who make minimum wage and are barely getting by, why do they vote for politicians who are against raising the minimum wage just because of what those politicians are saying about guns or abortion or about the flag, right? Don't those people know what's good for them? and again, we're in Alabama. So for many years, poor whites in Alabama voted a certain way because of racial prejudice, when actually it was in their economic self-interest. Poor whites, it was in their economic self-interest to vote along with African Americans to form a real majority that would have really changed policies in the state. But for years, racism and segregationism prevented that from happening. So I totally agree with this. A lot of people are misinformed. A lot of people, I think, have the wrong priorities or bad priorities, right? A lot of people are completely uninformed. But, I should be looking at myself in the mirror here and say, well, whose job is it then? Who gets paid to actually make people better informed? And people like me. So I need to be doing a better job. There's no doubt about that. Okay. And I do think we should do something about misinformation and disinformation. But I'm talking about the responses that we have when democracy doesn't come out the way that we want it to. We think there's something wrong, something broken about the process, or fundamentally flawed in the process. Okay. One response, a sad response that people have when democracy systematically doesn't give them the outcomes they want, is to quit. Okay. They either give up on democracy itself and think about violence or extremism as a way of making society more just, or at least more the way they want it to be. Or there's another form of leaving too, when it could be moving somewhere else, right? Quitting on democracy in one place and saying, well, I think I can get a better shot of what I want with democracy in another part of the country or another country. I don't know how many people actually did leave the country when either George W. Bush or Donald Trump were elected. Probably less than said they were going to leave. I don't know where Trump supporters will go if they lose the election this time. But all kidding aside, I have personally known in my 30 years here, people who've left Alabama simply because they said, I think democracy can work better in other parts of the country where I'd rather live. Okay, and it's a sad thing to hear, but it's true. But the idea that people would actually give up on democracy itself, or give up on a particular state or a particular country because democracy was systematically not giving them what they thought they wanted or what they needed, that leads to an important question, right? From the beginning, I've started with Stephen Reed's assumption that the reason we like processes or don't like processes is because the frequency with which they give us what we want, or what we want to happen, that they come out the way we want them to come out. And that the reason we're unhappy with a process is because it doesn't give us the results we want. Okay. Again, I know that there are ways the process could be fixed, and I do believe that the process were fixed in all those various and sundry ways, that it would give us the outcomes or more of the outcomes that we want. But what if we still found ourselves in the minority all the time? If democracy still was, more often than not giving us the policies of the politicians we want? Would we still have faith in the democratic process? Would we still have faith in democracy? It's really hard to love a process. And, processes are unpredictable, right? Processes are about the journey and not the destination, not the end. So I think it's helpful to keep in mind this quote from Judge William Hastie. William Hastie actually could have well been, he's called a justice here, he could have well been the first African-American Supreme Court justice in the United States before Thurgood Marshall. Kennedy was considering appointing him to the Supreme Court. He was, I believe, the first African-American federal court of appeals judge in American history. Anyway, here's a quote, probably from one of his judicial decisions. Democracy is a process, not a static condition. It is becoming rather than being. It can easily be lost, but it is never fully won. Its essence is eternal struggle. Okay. So there's a number of things in that quote, right? That it is a process. It's not about instant gratification. It's not about always getting, or even, usually getting the results you want. It's never totally achieved. You can never kind of, wipe your hands and say, well, that's done. We've achieved democracy, right? It's an ongoing struggle, and struggles aren't fun. But our UU principle is really a commitment to a process, and it's scary to commit to a process. You know, I've never been married, and I'm probably treading on dangerous ground here for those of you who are. But, you know, one thing that scares me about marriage is the idea of, well, how do I know that the person I marry is going to be 40 years from now, more or less the same person they were when I married them, or the kind of person that I can relate to, right? How do I know what things life is going to throw in our way before I commit to this marriage thing? And the answer is you don't, right? Um, and that's what's scary about committing to a process. The issue of finding yourself on the losing side of the issue has been an issue recently in churches in the United States. Both the Presbyterian Church USA and the United Methodist Church, as you may know, have gone through very divisive struggles over gay and transgender rights. And they've come out differently over the years. Pro-GLBT factions have sometimes won, sometimes lost. It's played out differently in the two different churches. And there have been people who have stuck with their home church, even though they ended up on the losing side on something that was extremely important to them. And I really have to admire and respect those people. The people who stayed with the Presbyterian Church when the Presbyterian Church decided to go in a much more GLBT-friendly direction. The people who are against that, some of them did stay with the church. Now, a lot of them, perhaps most of them, might have left. They even started a new denomination, you know, dedicated to opposing some of the things that the church had come out in favor of. And as you've seen in the last year, the United Methodist Church is going through a very hard struggle right now. So I do respect the people who are willing to stay with their denominations, even though they found themselves in the minority on a particular issue. And there may have been, you know, bad things about the process. But my point is to stay committed to a democratic process, right? I admire the people who stayed with the Presbyterian Church when they decided to allow leadership that was GLBT. And I pray and I hope that the people who made the courageous decision to stay with the church, even though they disagreed with this decision, will, through their contacts with new GLBT members and leaders in their church, come to a new understanding of what it means to be GLBT and what role they can play and what gifts they can bring to the church. Similarly, I respect those Methodists who stayed in the United Methodist Church, even though the decision for the time being has gone against them. You know, they're committed to trying to change hearts and minds and committed to a process that they hope will eventually lead to a different outcome. The important thing, I believe, is to continue to respect the process. One thing that worries me, I mean, as legitimate as all these complaints about democracy, you know, being rigged or the decks being stacked against certain people or corrupt, is that there are arguments that both sides can and do make when the process doesn't come out the way they want it to come out. And if both sides, you know, on different occasions are saying that about the process, does that decrease our respect for the process in general as a whole, right? You know, and so I'm wondering if it's time to rededicate ourselves to the democratic process, knowing that it's not going to be fun, knowing that it's not going to be easy, and knowing that despite our best efforts, the process is always going to be imperfect and it's not always going to come out the way we want it to. I've already made the marriage analogy. Let me maybe get myself into a different kind of trouble by making the inevitable Nick Saban analogy, right? Nick Saban is the process guy. He's the guy who's committed to a particular process. Whether you believe him or not, Nick Saban says that he believes that following his process, or the process he thinks will work, is more important to him than wins and losses. For example, Nick Saban hates it when his team kind of lucks into a win, when his team plays lousy for most of the game, yet magically, because of screw-ups by the other side, wins the game anyway. Fans love that, or at least this fan loves that. Nick Saban hates it because his players did not perform up to their ability, and yet they still won the game. So process is something that Nick Saban values independently of wins, losses, points scored, etc. The flip side of that is Nick Saban also believes that even when you do go undefeated and blow out all your opponents by double digits, there is always room for improvement. You can always do better. You can never sit on your laurels, okay? That's no fun either. We want to sit on our laurels when we win. But Nick Saban reminds us that we can always do better. And years later, the players that Nick Saban puts in the NFL thank him for teaching them that mindset, because they say it's helped them not just in the pros. Those who never go into the pros say that having that mindset really helped them throughout life. Another comparison I want to make about this discussion of processes is 12-step programs. I don't have a lot of exposure to 12-step programs. I've been to some meetings. But again, it's commitment to a process, and backsliding, going off the wagon, slipping up, going back to bad habits, going back to old ways. That's always going to happen, and that's explicitly acknowledged at 12-step meetings, right? The catchphrases they keep saying, that they say at 12-step meetings are keep coming back, or it works if you work it, okay? Rededicate yourself, recommit yourself to the process, and there's always hope that you can do better the next day. There's also the belief, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, that you're never totally cured. You're never totally over whatever the problem or difficulty it was that led you into the 12-step group. No matter how many chips you get, no matter how many days or years sober you have, you stay in the program because you can always do better. 3 thoughts I want to leave you with. Faith in the democratic process is faith in the long term. Faith in countless hours of dedicated and usually unpleasant, sometimes ugly, sometimes boring, tedious work. Arguing, bargaining, compromising, settling for less, trying to get more, phone calls, email, organizing meetings, listening to the same arguments both from your side and the opposing side over and over again, seeing the best and worst of human nature on display. Democracy, again, is not for people who believe in instant gratification or revolution. It is evolution. It is a journey. It is 1 step forward, 2 steps back. It is seeing things that you worked hard to fight for, unfortunately, get ignored or even get repealed. The second thought is that the democratic process, the second thought is that democracy isn't ideal. I came across a book title, I didn't really look at the book, saying that democracy doesn't exist, but we'll miss it when it's gone, right? Even if we never get democracy totally right, it should always be in our minds as an ideal. And if we ever thought that was no longer possible or no longer worth striving for, we would lose a great deal, okay? The third point I want to leave you with is faith in democracy means having faith in your fellow citizen or your fellow church member, whom we disagree with. Theodore Parker, who was a leading light in the history of Unitarian Universalism, has a quote where he says, democracy means not I am as good as you are, but you are as good as I am. My connection with the sacred is only as precious as my willingness to acknowledge that same connection in others, okay? It's fun to say I'm as good as you are and stand up for yourself and say, yeah, I belong here. It's not always quite as fun to say to the other person you disagree with, you belong here too. You have as much right to your opinion and your participation as I do, okay? Finally, I don't want to make it seem like there's no good result to be obtained from democracy, right? That it's never about results. I mean, one result of a process, ironically, is it's supposed to make us better citizens and better people generally, right? The more we participate in democracy, the more we build the skills necessary to participate more effectively in democracy and to make democracy work better, okay? So we do believe that engaging in this process makes us better people and makes this a better country or a better church or a better denomination. So maybe that is one result that we can all agree on, is that if we all in our various and sundries and ways become better citizens as a result of sticking with the process and being patient with it, that's a result that we can all agree on and share joy in. Thanks for your attention.
Please read with me the words at the bottom of your screen. As we extinguish this chalice flame, let us remember that we carry the light within ourselves, which brings healing to a broken world and hope for the days ahead.
Neighbors and kindred, justice work is not always easy, but it is absolutely necessary. During these difficult times, let us remember that we are still working for justice. Go in peace.